Start soon. Okay. Whoops. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Bitcoin Film Club. Today, we're honored to have Jamie King here as a guest. He's got a great experience in the film industry. He's made one of the great films that was one of the 6 feature films that we screened at the Bitcoin Film Fest in March of last year in Poland. And it's just great to be able to talk with him today. In terms of just quick updates before we get started, the Bitcoin Film Fest, we've got a lot of stuff going on. We are going to be this weekend in Lugano, Plan B, for the conference, the very last day. So if you're going there on Sunday, the conference is extended, and we're going to have in the venue of the conference just one day with only Bitcoin Film Fest, where we're going to have 6 hours of watching films, of discussion panels, short films, long films. There's going to be a few projects pitching also the film they're working on. So make sure not to miss that. And of course, just a reminder that April next year, 19th to 21st in Warsaw, Poland, will be the 2nd edition of the Bitcoin Film Fest, where we're going to have even more films, because I think now we've got a list of about 15, or no, I think 12 is the accurate number, films that could be ready for the next Bitcoin Film Fest. So it would be great if we could premiere maybe not all of these films, but some of these films. So don't miss it. We're also organizing the European Halving Party, which will be the biggest halving party that will be in Europe. It's going to happen at the same time at the Film Fest, April 19th to 21st. Anyway, let's move on now to the great interview that we've got today with Jamie. Hey, Jamie, how's it going?
It's going well, thank you. Not bad at all. How with you?
Yeah, really good. Thanks. Happy to have this conversation. The first time we talked was, I think, over a year ago now. I think it was Brad Mills that introduced us, and we just had a quick conversation where you gave me a bunch of tips. I remember that was very, very useful. And yeah, and since then we've talked a couple times. Great to be able to have you as a guest and learn about everything you've been doing, you're doing, and future projects as well. So maybe
I'm mostly just having a 3-year-old. That's mostly what I'm doing. But on the side, I still manage to make films.
Yeah, I see. That must be a handful. Well, maybe you can tell the viewers what who are you? Introduce yourself.
Yeah, I guess these days I'm a filmmaker. I've been doing other things in the past. Let's go backwards. I'm a filmmaker. Yeah. Before that, I was doing a podcast. I managed to make a living from a podcast called Steal This Show that ran for 3 years in conjunction with a peer-to-peer file sharing site called Torrent Freak. And that was a show covering one of my main interests, which is the peer-to-peer technology and the peer-to-peer dynamic in general. So, before Bitcoin, there was BitTorrent, and BitTorrent was incredibly exciting to those of us who are interested in non-hierarchical, decentralized social organization, because you're too young to remember this, probably, and many of the viewers, I'm sure, will be also too young. But there was a time when watching films on the internet was both hard, expensive, and dependent on people, therefore, who had the infrastructure and the money to pay for streaming, or required you to pay significant amounts to stream. And so there was this bottleneck of who could use the internet to distribute content, to distribute their voice. And that bottleneck was broken by BitTorrent. Suddenly introduced this peer-to-peer dynamic that was, of course, premised on TCP/IP. Now, TCP/IP had been there, promising decentralized networking. It was working, but for ordinary people, it was like captured by the big providers, bottlenecked by lack of capital. People would commonly have a film. Well, sometimes people would have a film or a piece of content go viral and end up with a huge streaming bill, and BitTorrent suddenly changed that. And so I got super interested in BitTorrent, and I made one of the possibly the first, let's say the first documentary film, possibly the first film designed to be distributed over BitTorrent. and that was called Steal This Film. I made it with a few other people, and that was distributed in conjunction with the Pirate Bay, which is a brand people probably still recognized. At that time, it was one of the biggest one of the biggest web brands, one of the biggest portals, in the sense of how much traffic it was getting was like mind-blowing. And at that time, I think BitTorrent itself accounted for, if not 50% of the internet's traffic, then like a good solid 30-something% of the internet.
Really?
Yeah, it was absolutely. Wow. It's still big, by the way.
Yeah, it's still big. Yeah,
it was absolutely huge. And I remember we made this film, Steal This Film, which you can probably, I don't keep it up now, but you can probably find it on YouTube or even on BitTorrent search, if you can still find a BitTorrent site that's not been taken down. And we'd had this deal to put it on Pirate Bay and to put it on their front page, so that they took down their logo and they put the Steal This Film branding on the front page, which they did for us using their design. As it said, like, the only pirate film you need to see this summer. And I went to bed saying, if we get like 10,000 downloads, I'll be over the moon. And woke up the next day with the key sign that you've gone viral, is like really viral, is when your email, or back then it was when your email was full of your inbox was suddenly full of emails from like nutters, from, you know, from like really from like all kinds of people. There was like crazy people, there was fans, there was one academic who was saying, like a 3-page like A4, saying like, you have made the film, you fucked me, because I was supposed to make this is my arguments and mine would have been better than yours, and on and on and on. And it just like thousands, and the downloads, I think it was like 250,000 downloads the first day, and then it just went bananas, and it was like millions and millions of downloads.
Wow.
And it was like, it was kind of like they say on the internet, first in some way. Like, I'd had this idea to put if you enjoyed this film, send $1, which was as partly a joke. And I put the PayPal address. This was before crowdfunding. It was 2006. And I mean, like, a few people had done sort of DIY crowdfunding. Like, when I say a few, I mean like 3 or 4. So, and this joke turned into like 20,000 people. So they're sending $1.
Amazing.
Like this, and me realizing that now PayPal had taken a big chunk of every donation. So suddenly you were like, your mind was sharpened as to the architecture of donation. And then this will probably interest to people in the sort of foreshadowing of what was to come with financial censorship. PayPal looked at all the activity, saw the title of the film, and shut down the account and purloined our money. And when I inquired as to why, they said, well, you're promoting stealing.
All right. So wait, so that was back still 2006, you say, yeah?
Yeah, they were doing it then. So you could see already an early foreshadowing of the use of, because that was before they censored WikiLeaks. I'm not sure WikiLeaks existed in 2006. If not, then nearly. And so it sort of became this thing where no one in the mainstream realized that there was no mainstream coverage, because this was a time when to go big on the internet was not necessarily to go big in so-called mainstream. It was very divided, and I was kind of annoyed by it. I still wanted that recognition, and yet they didn't cover it. But what did start happening was that although the film was very gonzo, like, I didn't know how to use Final Cut at all, and neither did the person who was working on the film with me. And indeed, if you watch the film, the thing starts with the bleep that the Final Cut used to give when footage was missing. That was because we'd heard it so much that we thought it sounded cool by the end. And so, you know, we were complete rank amateurs, but some people in the documentary world started to take notice because the film, you know, people were seeing the film. And
it's also a unique distribution model at the time, right?
Unique and unique.
It still is, in fact. It still is. I don't know any film that, like, its objective is to, you know, distribute over torrent exclusively, right? Just
listen, after that, a few people copied it, and I, you know, I had, and so, you know, I had probably not my most glorious moments criticizing the people who came after me and sort of copied me with much better funding, because there were two polite versions of Steal This Film made, whose name the names now escape me, that were made with much higher budgets, because I made Steal This Film with money that I'd saved while I was lecturing philosophy, and no funding, and so people did do it. I'm not sure they distributed it over torrent, but they didn't design it to be distributed over torrents, but it was allowed to be shared. So, but yeah, it became interesting to the documentary film world, and the reasons for that were, I think, partly because of how many people saw the film, like millions and millions, and it was a very aggressive, it was a very militant film about sharing. So essentially what it was saying was, you have to remember that at the time, the discourse around piracy was like, piracy is bad for creators, sharing is terrible for creators, because one copy should equal one payment. And what we were saying was, well, listen, maybe there's a power in people just getting the film, watching the film, sharing the film, and deciding to do what they want. And if what they want is to donate, then okay. And if what they want is to share, then okay. Hasn't that offered me hasn't that afforded the filmmaker? I mean, films are made to be seen, and now this film has been seen. And so as a result, there was this whole second wave of interest in the distribution model at film festivals. And I kind of got this second career touring film festival. I mean, I saw it as parallel, because it's nothing to do with making films, touring film festivals and sort of promoting the outrageous idea that you might want to share your films for free. And as I was doing that, or you know, freely share your film. And as I was doing that, you saw the emergence of, you know, Kickstarter just started, Indiegogo just started, there was no Patreon. And so, you know, people started to consider, maybe I could do this. And so that then led to two other things, which I started doing. I decided after many conversations with filmmakers about how to distribute their films, who've been banging their heads against the wall of the traditional distribution system. And, you know, the fact is, the vast majority of films people want to make are not suitable for going on. I mean, Netflix didn't even exist in the same way then, but, you know, going on BBC or whatever, HBO, but you can put them on the internet. And so many filmmakers were asking me, how do I do this? You know, contrary to the panels I was put on, where it was mostly large distributors telling people, hey, this guy is an anarchist and a nihilist and will and he's drinking your milkshake, you know, and you don't listen to him. But the filmmaker would come to me at the end and say, hey, how can I do that? And I would tell them what I'd done, the same thing, and they never did it the same way. No one ever did it the same way. And so eventually I thought, there must be some new bottleneck here that I haven't perceived. And so I built a platform called Vodo, which stood for voluntary distribution network. And that was both a torrent-based distribution for film and a very early crowdfunding system. And then I spent about 5 years trying to get that to work. I'm not really a business guy, and so I don't think I perceived how hard the dynamics would be. But I did get into an interesting situation where BitTorrent Inc. Pursued me. I mean, I don't think it's wrong to say now, I can say now, to take over running BitTorrent Inc. But that was like completely unsuitable, because I was a squatter in London for like, I don't know, 10, 15 years. And I lived with next to no money. I mean, I was one of those people who got my food out of bins. And I literally lived in a commune. And suddenly I was flying to San Francisco, and this company is like, "Hey, Jamie, how are we going to make $50 million a year at BitTorrent Inc.?" And I'm like, I think you might be talking to the wrong guy here. I'll entertain you. I'll entertain this. And I just had no idea about the amount of money these people were making in San Francisco.
Right.
And I remember they wanted to buy Vodo, and I was like, well, I would want at least enough money to buy a house in San Francisco. And I remember them looking at me like I totally lowballed, like I totally come in too low. And they were like, "God, we were going to offer you like 30 million. You'd like ask for, a house. Of course, now that would be worth 30 million." But
yeah.
So it was a very, very weird time for me as someone who was like your age, you know. And so then that then turned into a good situation where they sponsored us for years as like the legal arm, essentially, the kind of, if I could put it this way, the Sinn Féin to BitTorrent's IRA.
Right.
In a way, that was the situation, because all of our films were shared by filmmakers like you who decided that would be the best route and wanted to share. And so it was like, anyway, that eventually came to an end because it wasn't making a lot of money for us, although BitTorrent was sponsoring us. And although it was more money than I'd ever seen, that's for sure, it still wasn't going to grow into like the 50 million a year. That was not. And eventually I couldn't continue. So I took a little time, had a mini nervous breakdown, and then I started up Steal This Show that was like a podcast about peer-to-peer culture and torrent. But that as anyone I'm sure of your generation realizes, like, peer-to-peer culture is not really a big thing like anymore. File sharing is not really a big thing anymore. Torrents.
Yeah, I mean, I used to like torrent all the time. Now it's not so much, I have to say. Although no, I do use some streaming platforms, so it's kind of, let's say, it's torrent without feeling like it's torrent. You're no longer looking at the kilobytes per second, and you don't need to wait for there's like the live streaming of a torrent.
Well, yeah, and the reason for that is the same reason that you got the rise of YouTube, and we used to deride YouTube as ridiculous when torrent started, because it was an inferior, clearly an inferior model, but what I didn't see, and in a way should have been obvious, is that the cost of streaming from a server fell so much as to make it irrelevant. And now it's so low that pirate sites could literally afford to pump 3 adverts at you and then give you a full 1080p or even 4K copy of a film. That's how cheap it is. Or that French site Real de Breed has got a copy of every film in the world, apparently, somewhere hiding behind a hash. And so it just got less and less relevant. But I continued to believe, and that was what Steal This Show was about, that there was something important about the peer-to-peer dynamic. And in a way, I stopped the show too early, because after 3 years of doing that show, it became clearer and clearer. Like, I literally stopped the show as COVID started. And when COVID started was when it became obvious that all those platforms that had all those content platforms that had previously distributed content under the idea that they were mere conduits, they were protected under law, under the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, as mere conduits for data, where we're not responsible for the specifics of what Pierre and Jamie are saying on YouTube. We're just a conduit for their content. Suddenly it was obvious that had shifted. They become publishers, and they were going to strenuously adjust the content that was available, and that Twitter was going to strenuously adjust algorithmically and otherwise the content that was seen. And of course, as soon as it became clear that you weren't able to say whatever you wanted on YouTube or on Twitter or on Facebook, you weren't any longer able to publish your content and be damned. It became obvious that peer-to-peer was going to be really important again. And that's why Nostr is now going to be really important again, and why Mastodon has a shot at being really important. And of course, there are problems with those systems. So, and I mention all this to say that in a way, to me, Bitcoin, because by the way, Bitcoin is called Bitcoin because of BitTorrent. That whoever Satoshis were, the Satoshis were, they, BitTorrent was a huge brand when they came up with the name Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer relation premised on the TCP/IP structure of the internet. Okay, it's structured differently. There were even at the earliest phase of BitTorrent, I always forget this, but there was like a whole system that preceded, I forget the name, that preceded BitTorrent that involved coin. I mean, way before shitcoins. And it was a shitcoin, but it was way before shitcoins. It was that was intended to pay for people to seed things. So it involved a token that would be exchanged. So there was even a coin. So it's like there's a linear development. And of course, Bram Cohen went on to create a shitcoin, creator of Bit. Anyway, so, in a way, in a really important way, my interest in Bitcoin is and was nothing new, in the sense that it's just, I mean, saying just makes it sound like I think it's far more important than BitTorrent, because BitTorrent involved the symbolic order, and Bitcoin involves the basic order of human action and human cooperation in the offline, if you like. In as much as the offline world still exists, Bitcoin is about regulating human interaction and the network of all human interactions that are called collectively the economy. And so it's like the settling of the peer-to-peer relation into the everyday world at what you call the very base layer. I don't mean the base layer of money, I mean just the base layer of human interaction. So it's like, in that sense, it's part of a continuum of what the internet like I always say to people, there's nothing more internet-y than Bitcoin. Like it's the realization of the promise of what began in the 1970s with the very first realization of a decentralized, non-hierarchical, distributed relation that anybody can join, anyone can participate in, and that doesn't that limits the ability of gatekeepers and intermediaries to decide what happens on the network. Anyway, my God, if you ask me one question,
and so what no, that's good. And what you meant is that Bitcoin has the potential of becoming this base peer-to-peer technology that everyone uses, therefore it could open the gates to more peer-to-peer solutions as well, right? That's kind of what you were hinting to.
If you dropped out a little bit, but would you mind repeating the question? So I'm not guessing.
Yeah. So what you were getting at is the fact that Bitcoin could become this peer-to-peer technology that everyone uses, that is at the base of human interaction. Therefore, it could also open the gates for more peer-to-peer technologies used daily. Is that kind of what you mean?
Like, well, here's what I mean. And I know your film involves this analysis from what you've told me. If you consider the monetary system, so what does money do? It provides a kind of protocol for governing human interaction on and offline. And like I said, I don't really think the offline exists. I mean, obviously for many people, it can exist. Let's say in some village in Africa or whatever, you can imagine there's people with no phones, but that's less and less frequent. But still it governs. So if, you've got cash in your pocket, you can go out and you can make an interaction. You can buy or sell. You can make an exchange. And it does this by providing an intermediary system of value that essentially allows that provides a scalable barter scalable system of exchange where you don't constantly need to be estimating the value of things. It does all this for you, but that system is provably and completely captured by intermediaries who manipulate, but naturally, just like every intermediary ever has, the system for their own gain and their own good. And so this is what many people have been writing, making this analysis. The system therefore is distorted, and when you're making an interaction with someone, you're buying, let's say, some bananas in a market, it's no longer a reliable exchange. It's an exchange which is invisibly mediated by a third party that's acting in their own interest. And what Bitcoin does is it provides, even if you're not happening to use it, it provides a pure peer-to-peer relation, a pure system for exchanging value that is governed by a peer-to-peer relation. In that sense, it's very similar to BitTorrent. It removes the intermediary and provides a better way of doing it, because BitTorrent's still better, you know. And in a weird way, you could say, I haven't really thought about this before, but you could say that CBDCs are a bit like Netflix, in that Netflix sort of responds to BitTorrent by saying, well, okay, look, we know people want these digital films and they want to watch everything. So what we'll do is we'll give you a much better deal. Like, it's going to be $9.99. I think it was $6.99 to start with. Everyone's like, holy shit, $6.99 for all the films I can eat. And they're like, yeah, that's right. So you don't need BitTorrent anymore. And that kind of switches everyone over. And then they start. So it's not $6.99 anymore. It's $9.99. And you know, we said it was all the films. Well, now it's just our films, and so on and so on. And so they gradually do this bait and switch. CBDCs are clearly some kind of similar response, right? To the existence of Bitcoin, except they've kind of got it completely wrong. They think what we want is speed, and they think think what we want is like digital and fast. I think maybe that's their analysis, when actually what we want is like sovereign and intermediary-less. Anyway, that's what I think. So I think it's like a realization, like you could draw a line between blogging and Bitcoin. In the sense that the internet poses this possibility that there can be human interaction, that all human interaction could now take place without intermediaries, without gatekeepers. And you start to see that relation, that social relation, popping up in different areas of life. So you get like bloggers, and then you get Uber, and then you get BitTorrent, and then you get and then suddenly it's money, and everyone says, or the mainstream, whatever the establishment say, it'll never happen to money. My attitude the whole way along has been, why would it not happen to money? Why? It's happened to, literally decimated every other, it's decimated the news industry, it's decimated the music industry, totally changed the music industry, it's totally changed film. Why is money going to be the last thing? Well, maybe the last, yes, but it's going to fall for sure, because everything else has. So it's like, this is like, if you want to put it that way, the mega bull case for Bitcoin. You know, the idea that eventually Bitcoin becomes the bait, that becomes the numeraire. What the idea that, I think it's Eric Weinstein who always uses that term, the numeraire, the unit of account, the sort of sine qua non of what is value. Oh, well, so instead of saying how many, this is the meme, right? By the time when Bitcoin really makes it, you won't need to ask how many dollars it's worth. It'll flip. You'll be asking, how many Bitcoin is my dollars worth? I had $1,000 here. How many Bitcoin can I get for it? And you'd be like, oh, I'm not sure I want to make that exchange, at all, So I think that's roughly what I think. I think we're in a continuum, and it's a continuum that like should link the excitement in Bitcoin to the whole history of excitement in the development of the internet as a non-hierarchical way of distributing, a way of facilitating human interaction. And so it really surprises and dismays me that neither, okay, libertarian, some anarchists are interested, but they tend to be the American libertarian anarchists. I think very few leftist anarchists see that continuum of excitement and or are in it. And that's incredibly disappointing to me, because for me, it's totally continuous with what I was excited about when I was a kid.
I think also a lot of people just, still people today consider that Bitcoin is just funny internet money, and I think it's a matter of studying and actually spending the time. I think when we did the first edition of the Bitcoin Film Fest last year, so Tomek, he's the co-founder of the Bitcoin Film Fest. He also organizes, I think now every 2 years, a conference that is a libertarian conference in Poland. And so he did it at the same time as the Bitcoin Film Fest last year, and we brought a lot of libertarians into the film fest, and he organized also during the conference a lot of things that would bring Bitcoin into the front, because libertarians, I think, are Bitcoiners that still haven't found Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin is a tool for all of the ideas that they have of how the world should work. Bitcoin can unlock these things, but a lot of them didn't know anything about Bitcoin, or were not necessarily interested, and were
and it's very strange, because before I made Steal This Film, so prior to 2006, in let's say the early 2000s, I was very involved, let me just say that, with what was then called the anti-globalization movement. And that was, you've seen the images of the Seattle anti-G8, Geneva. Those were all anti-G8 as this grew. You've seen like the big conflagrations. This was a grouping of people who were super interested in the idea of non-hierarchical and flat organization before Occupy Wall Street. Occupy Wall Street came out of that movement, and those people were, that was a time of indie media, which I don't know if you remember indie media. Indie media was kind of like a self-publishing blogging platform. This was the era of Slashdot, the idea that anybody could write a post and post it, and people would vote. As prior to Reddit, people would vote for, it's like the People's News, vote for the most valuable stories. And there was so much excitement about that peer-to-peer thing that was like excitement that was being talked about and discussed and animating organizers who were on the ground. Those, the early days of Twitter, for example, not a lot of people know this, but Twitter started as an app called Text Mob that was designed to, the reason there was a character limit until very recently on Twitter was because it was designed to let large groups of protesters organize themselves by texting a single server that would then text everybody in the group, so that you wouldn't have to text thousands of people and get a bill, because they used to charge you like 6 cents per SMS or whatever. Right. So it was a system for like letting big groups of demonstrators organize in the same way that the people who were trying to stop them could organize. And that was what became Twitter. So there was this whole interest in that moment of like the way the internet was developing and its peer-to-peer structure, with the way that people were trying to organize offline, and yet that never carried through. A lot of people were interested in BitTorrent, although less of them, but almost no one carried through to an interest with Bitcoin. And indeed, I would say that if you ask most people who count themselves as anarchists now in America or in Europe, I suspect they would be anti-Bitcoin.
Right. Yeah.
And I believe that the reason that they are anti-Bitcoin is because, this is just a guess, but I think it's because they have internalized and accepted the idea that the state needs to be able to redistribute. So they think things are incredibly unfair, and they see that there's an immense imbalance in the financial landscape. And the famous thing is that the 1%. Of course, it's not 1%; it's the 0.001%. But that's and I think they think that we need to redistribute that 1%'s money, and that if Bitcoin Bitcoin is uncontrollable, and therefore it would remove our ability to redistribute wealth. And I think that's the reason they've swallowed the idea that it's about tax avoidance, or that it's about, so that whole sovereignty idea, self-sovereignty, is inimical to their vision, to their view, which is, holy shit, we live in such an unequal society. If these fuckers get Bitcoin, we'll never stop them.
Yeah.
And I think that's the reason. And it's sad, because I think that stops them from seeing that this is the most profound restructuring of the financial relation in, like, I don't know, hundreds of years.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And that's, I mean, I think they'll get it in their own time, it's, unfortunately for people that, and that's kind of the sad reality of this Bitcoin meme, is that for a lot of people that are resisting it so much, in the end, it's just have fun staying poor kind of thing. They're unfortunately the people that will maybe be moving less to Bitcoin simply because they ideologically haven't been accepting it and ignored the fact that, like, their money or what they save in is losing value, as opposed to this asset that they've been just ignoring and even demonizing, right?
Yeah, I have this what they used to call it, a force meme. I'm trying to force this meme, which is Bitcoin will pass you twice, first as a missed boat and the second as a life raft. And that's my attempt at, like, a banger, and it never works. And but I think it's the same point you're making. And I think we're rapidly approaching the life raft phase, because it's now clear that what they call financial censorship is going to be even if you set aside CBDCs, themselves, financial censorship is going to be an integral part of this new paradigm of control, which involves micro censorship of content across the platforms, algorithmic control, and I think financial censorship and financial nudging is going to be a massive. It already is a big part of it. It just it's just yet to visit most people.
I agree. Okay, that's a very interesting conversation. I'd say we could go on, I guess, forever, but let's move on a bit. So, the very first Bitcoin content that you did, I believe, is This Machine Breeds, right?
Yeah, that's the first thing I made that's about Bitcoin. Yeah, I decided it was because it was the first wave of the FUD. The FUD canon. The FUD canon was Bitcoin is dirty,
right?
Ecologically, energetically dirty, and I had been making some films unrelated, not tangentially related to Bitcoin, on YouTube, which have now been banned from YouTube, which are called Schism. Yeah, they just shut down my channel completely without any warning. Yeah, so again, it's another wave of censorship. And Brad Mills was a fan of these films. We hadn't spoken for years, but we started talking again about those films. And then it came up, this new FUD canon was loaded, primed, and fired, and it was heavy. With the FUD was heavy. I don't know whether you remember. It seemed pretty serious. And when Elon said, "Oh, I'm not taking money for my clean Teslas anymore," we had a big dip. And so the idea came up about making a film that would address this FUD, and I accepted that mission to make that film. And so then that was about 6 months, five or 6 months work, something like that. And if the film was This Machine Greens, yeah.
Well, I mean, so I recommend anyone that hasn't watched it to watch it. I think it covers a lot of the energy FUDs very well. I don't think there's better content to cover that this way. And, like, I think it's 40 minutes, right?
Yeah, it turned out it was supposed to be 16 minutes, and I couldn't get it done in 16 minutes. It's like a TV hour, basically. Not that it'll ever go anywhere near TV. Yeah. And of course, it's ironic now because the people who were priming and firing the FUD cannon turned out to be BlackRock, and BlackRock have now completely turned tail on the whole ESG thing and are beginning to embrace Bitcoin. Who saw that coming?
Yeah.
So it's like, I think it was worthwhile, but and you wonder, did anybody at BlackRock ever watch this Machine Greens? Like maybe, right? Like who knows? So it's like, it's become really just a small, we're in a weird place because the fight continues. You still got Greenpeace going on and on, paid for by fucking XRP. Saying, Bitcoin is dirty, and you've still got people like Troy fighting that, and Margot fighting that. Troy Cross and Margot Paez fighting that. But at the same time, the people who really originated that FUD were the masters of the universe, BlackRock, and BlackRock are now going to do a Bitcoin ETF. So it's like, in a way, you're in this weird situation where the FUD sort of continues, but it's limp and half-hearted. Because the actual people who primed the FUD cannon are now like, oh no, that's all finished now. We're on to a new phase where we're actually going to pump it. I mean, I can't even, as they say, I would never have guessed that was what was going to happen.
Yeah, so soon, right? Yeah, I agree. Me neither.
So soon. It's like a year, no, 2 years after. So I know there's a whole film being made called Dirty Coin.
Yeah.
And I wonder, they better get that out quick, is all I'll say, because
I think it's coming out, but I don't remember the date exactly. So Alana, she's the director. She also made a short film out of Dirty Coin called Stranded. We're actually going to be screening it in Lugano on Sunday. So this is already out, and I think that the full film is supposed to be out by the end of the year. I'm pretty sure she's screening it. The plan is at some conference. I don't remember. Yeah, I don't remember which one though.
Yeah, so that'll be good, because I think that argument is, I mean, there's no way that BlackRock and all the others are going to be offering an ETF without seeing to the marketing. They will heavily marketing everything that we said in This Machine Green will become part of become part of the popular normie view of Bitcoin. And I do believe, by the way, what I said in This Machine Greens. There's nothing cynical about it. I guess in my back of my mind, I'd always thought, before I made This Machine Greens, I'd always thought, well, the proof of work is necessary. Mine's better than mine decided that this was the right way to do it. It's unfortunate that it uses a lot of energy. And that was kind of like, because like, I'm obviously interested in carbon emissions. I went vegan because of not wanting to. I'm not vegan anymore, but for 5 years I was vegan because of that. But when I actually looked into it, I realized this is completely the wrong way of understanding what energy is and what energy means, and that there's this direct correlation between the amount of energy we use and are able to deploy, and how and the so-called flourishing of human life on Earth. And that, in fact, Bitcoin, in demanding that people, in creating competition for hash power, in effect demands that people find more efficient, less used forms of energy that are by definition cleaner, because efficiency is next to cleanliness. And that's exactly what's happened, looking for volcano power, recovering heat, trying to use methane, and so on. And so recovering gas that's spewing from oil rigs, and so on and so forth. And so all of that is absolutely true. And I'll 100% guarantee that BlackRock's new FUD cannon will be loaded with these talking points. And that will be, and so this is going to go mainstream. Like, it's going to go mainstream in the next quarter.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, especially once their ETF actually goes out, if, / when it does goes out. I mean,
wasn't that yesterday? was yesterday.
Yeah, that's so funny, man. But
Yeah.
yeah. I think it's yeah, and I agree with you. That's exactly the kind of I mean, it's the true message around Bitcoin and the energy, and it's the right way of dealing with the energy FUD, I believe. And it's great that there's content like the one that you created that gathers this information in one place that can also help people digest that. Because we know that HSBC has done reports in the past 3 months about exactly that, and other like big consulting firms, etc., have started doing the same thing. But as this actually starts getting out into the media, I think content like this machine greens, like dirty coin, it's just going to make it easier for people to understand. And so I hope this brings a burst of views into this machine greens. That
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously, having made Steal This Film,
Mm.
I'm like perma disappointed because I
Yeah,
always
when you're up here.
yeah, especially because I spent to Steal This Film only took me like 2 weeks to make it. I had no idea people spent months on films and years,
Yeah.
and so I think this Machine Greens is on, like, across the various copies, it's like 100,000 something views, and and that they're still picking up gradually, and I'm fine with that.
Mhm.
And I'm sure some people, you showed it, and it was at Pacific Bitcoin, and people are screening it, and that's great. And of course, it as a filmmaker, purely personally, I did it partly because I believe in Bitcoin, partly because I wanted to give something back. I'm not a developer. I think, like you, I started writing code when GPT 3.5 came out. That's like how I do it.
Okay. I
So
mean, yeah, so it is very useful. I mean, I used to do data science in the past and so on, but I do use a lot GPT to code. It's shortcuts.
I use it all the time to write
Mhm.
code now. I'm sure it's garbage code, but my point is, I'm never going to be a Bitcoin developer. I'm never going to be a contributor. And I think I didn't have a great taste for becoming a Bitcoin. I didn't convert my podcast to Bitcoin, partly because I didn't want to be like single issue. I just didn't want to do it. And indeed, the film I'm making now, which is called Trust, it is about Bitcoin. Bitcoin is probably its main topic, but strangely, I think I could make the film without mentioning. In a way, I could.
Well, I believe your trailer, I mean, or at least it's been a while since I watched it last, but I mean, the very beginning of it just talks at least of some core principles of society, of life, of how the world works, without mentioning Bitcoin at all, right? It's more about freedom in general, right? And
It's about
how it's taking our system, yeah?
It's about it's a kind of a complex thesis, but the thesis is roughly this is what I've kind of come to, is that that we're in an episode. I think it's so we're in an era of schism where most people can't agree on anything. It's very hard to find points of agreement, but paradoxically, one thing that people can agree on is that it's hard to find a point of agreement. And I call this schism. That people can agree that schism is the paradigm, and that we're getting separated into what I call sort of archipelagos of meaning, where we're all locked inside our little epistemic bubbles, some people call it, right? And I think we've lost, part of this is losing trust in the institutions that previously connected us and guided us. And I think that this is a consequence of technological development. And I think that what happens historically is that every time you get a new information technology, you get a total restructuring of the social relations. And I think, so in a way, where we are now is like the 30 Years' War after the printing press. So this is like, you get the printing press, and the printing press totally restructures who has the ability to interpret the word, the good word, the Bible, and gives rise to this flowering of interpretations of the word of God and what it is to live a good life and how you should live. And this creates total fucking chaos. And a shitload of crazy things happen, and it leads to war, and it leads to a total restructuring of social relations. And I think we're in something similar now. And so the film begins with this context of like, you are in an epistemic crisis. And what I'm trying to do is relate the emergence of Bitcoin to this epistemic crisis. Because what I think is that there was this peer-to-peer relation, which is what I've described. It is a continuum from the earliest days of the web to the emergence of BitTorrent to Bitcoin. It is a continuum, but it adds something new, which is a type of epistemic certainty where you don't just say, hey, we can run a financial system without any gatekeepers, intermediaries. That's not all that Bitcoin is saying. It's also saying, and we can eliminate fraud, and we can eliminate double spending, and all of the problems with dishonesty that you would imagine would be rampant on a, which BitTorrent also attempted to do that with its tit for tat system. It has a system for governing, well, okay, you're downloading the file, but your client makes sure that you upload the file too. And this is like baked into the protocol. So BitTorrent has similar ideas about how to create like a game theory balance. And in doing so, it answers possibly the key question. Well, you mentioned before we started talking Leviathan. It answers the key question that the Enlightenment posed. Hobbes, for example, posed, which is what are you prepared to give up in order to get order? So you want to obtain the right to live, the ability to live a decent life and to have social order. What will you give up? Will you give up your violence? Will you give up your right to move freely? Will you give up, what will you give up in order to let your 3-year-old grow up unencumbered by violence, by being pestered, and so on and so on? And the answer you give to that question defines where you sit on the political spectrum. And in my view, all answers to that question are honorable because no one's ever solved it. It bothers me not at all. I'm not totally unsurprised that there's some people who say we should give up everything. We should, give up all our freedom, within certain limits to the state, because we need to redistribute wealth. We need to look after the handicapped. We need to look after the unfortunate, the injured, and so on and so forth. The orphaned. And it surprises me also not at all that there are those who say we should give up nothing because those inefficiencies are not worth having, and so on and so forth. What Bitcoin does, one of the things it does, is it creates a new way of saying we can create a type of order which doesn't require you to give up sovereignty to a third party, and a type of certainty that is established without an epistemic hierarchy. Does that make sense? So let me put it another way. Everything prior, essentially, to the internet, you could say everything, all of the social hierarchy, everything that Chomsky was talking about in manufacturing consent, almost every form of post-war organization depended on what Martin Gurry calls the industrial form of media, the broadcast system. And that is replicated throughout society. The financial system, what you're talking about in your film, it's a kind of hierarchy with fewer very powerful entities at the top, and then it gradually distributing down the chain until you're affected by something involving your bank at the local level. Same with the media system, and same with every system, the medical system, and so on and so on. And under that system allowed certainty to be developed, allowed you to have a picture of the world which was stable, and shared by most people. And you might be more left, or you're more right, or more in the middle. These political possibilities were defined by the people who controlled that system, and by the very architecture of that system itself, that very literally the way TV works. The fact you need a lot of capital to be the person who broadcasts, all of that implies a control, like what did the CNN used to say, all the news I forget, that was the way it was. I think Dan Rather used to say that was the way it was on this day, like, I have control of reality. All of that is gone. We're in a middle phase where it's like nobody knows how you determine what reality is. And in this this interlude of chaos, you're getting various attempts to reestablish control. And CBDCs are part of that attempt to reestablish control. Micro censorship at Twitter, the imbrication of intelligence agencies with the social media system is an attempt to like almost successful attempt to reestablish control. But then you have these other systems emerging, like of which Bitcoin is one, but there have been others like free software, right? If you've been a developer, free software and the Linux operating system is a non-hierarchical distributed system that has created the best piece of software, the best operating system that exists and has ever existed, and it has no has no boss. And that is, I wish people were more interested in that, because it's incredibly bullish for the future of Bitcoin. Because if anybody thinks we can't do it, you say, just have a look at free software and how that's developed. Because it's like your phone is running it. Even your iPhone is premised on a BSD. And your Steam, your Steam OS, your every server in the world almost running Apache on the LAMP. It's just dominant doesn't get it, and that's like that was against the previous hierarchy, which was Microsoft Windows and IBM, of course, and I would say then it's in that context you have to see the emergence of Bitcoin as an epistemic artifact that establishes certainty. And certainty is that one Bitcoin, to use the cliche, equals one Bitcoin, and does it without the necessity to appeal to authority, without the need to have a man with a capital M, who says, I am the fucking man, and I am telling you that one Bitcoin is worth whatever it is today, $28,000. And you can believe me because my shirt is buttoned, my suit is on, I have the credentials, I am on the TV station that you trust, and I am telling you that it is worth 28,000. That is how it was done before. I mean, okay, there are other parts to it, right? There's the petrodollar component, but there is a massive epistemic component to how the financial system was set up, and I believe it's totally in crisis. And I think in that context, the emergence of Bitcoin is interesting, not merely as money, but as, and this is what Jeff Booth is touching on in his book, I think, as an epistemic artifact that can provide certainty in a world that has no longer got a way of doing that. And that, I think, is important at the level of the printing press. Does this I'm thinking that I probably haven't structured my answer very well, but that's
no, but it's fine. I think it's because you just cover so many different because this is what your film is about, right? It's about all of these different elements that can be touched by Bitcoin, and I think it's a great way of explaining it. I was thinking maybe we'd want to watch the trailer, actually.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah,
things have progressed a little from there, but at least I can talk about what's similar and changed.
Right. Okay. Wait. So let me pull it up. I want to go on full screen. 1 second. I think from your website I can't go full screen, so I gotta go on Vimeo. But I'm on it now. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, I think you can see my screen already, right?
Yeah.
Yeah? All right, nice.
Mhm.
So I'll go full screen and let's watch it.
Mistrust.
Do you like the book being on the desk or not?
The sense that nothing is real or nothing is true.
Okay.
A crisis of trust, touching everything and everyone.
Alternative facts.
Government.
Order! Order!
Authority.
You're part of the fucking problem.
Media. Science and medicine.
I want to be vaccinated. I want to be free. I want to live my life.
American financial system is rocked to its foundation as Wall Street institutions topple under a mountain of debt.
And since 2008, this lack of trust has spread deep into one of our most basic systems, money. This is a film about trust
39715.
and what happens when it is gone.
If reports showed the free world to be under actual attack, the Go Code would be issued by presidential authorization.
But it also asks a question. What if a technology developed during the Cold War for a world facing weapons so powerful as to render trust impossible? What if this technology was now ready to take center stage in a world after trust?
The magic of Bitcoin is that engineering is arriving to economics for the first time in human history. And it's crypto resistant to corruption. It's the best anti-corrupt system we could come up with in the history of the world. And I think that's a really important idea.
Nice. It's really good. I have to say, I really like. Well, I'll stop sharing. I really like the sound. Like you did a really good job on the sound, like the different sound effects. I feel like they.
Yeah, you're a filmmaker, right? You know that took me a long time to make that. Yeah, it's like, yeah. I mean, the point of the film. I always hate rambling on about my ideas because I try to concentrate them down into the film in a coherent way, you know. Yeah. And but yeah, the thing that's really changed is I'm not going to focus on the Cold War as much, even though it is totally true that the cryptography that's behind Bitcoin emerges. There'll be a very brief thing about this, but it's this very strange moment where the very same people who are like in and out of the NSA, Whit Diffie and people like this, that are working on these new systems of encryption to run the nuclear system, the nuclear weapons system, but also to run banks. Because that it's like that's the way. Like at the same time, those same people are saying, I could see a future in which computers are used to control everyone through mass surveillance, and I can also see a future in which if we can get public-private key encryption into the commons, into the public domain, people could retain self-sovereignty and retain privacy. And it's that, and like, don't ask me how someone sees that in 1970, when not only didn't people have computers in their houses, there was, these huge mainframes that cost millions and millions of dollars, but somehow this like 3 people or 5 people see it. And they make the first seeds of what becomes, what it didn't even have a name, becomes cypherpunk. And it is the like seed of what BitTorrent is today. That you can hold this self-sovereignty in the form of public-private key encryption that literally like appears in the public-private key system, appears in the mind of Whit Diffie like some kind of like
Well, you see this, I didn't know that story, and it's amazing story. And in fact, that would be an amazing fiction film. Historical film about, like, it would be the Oppenheimer of Bitcoin kind of.
It is exactly like that. And so, I mean, Whit Diffie is still alive.
Yeah.
And he lives in Woodside in California, and in near Palo Alto, in Palo Alto. And I did set up an interview with him. And I believe, if anyone filmmakers are interested in it, I believe he wants someone to tell his story in detail. And I don't believe it's been told at the level of detail that it should have been told. And I do believe it's a fork in the road, an historical fork in the road, where if he hadn't taken the principled decision that he took to put public-private key encryption in the public domain, we wouldn't have what we have now. We wouldn't have it. We wouldn't have GPG. I mean, okay, like GPG, or PGP and GPG never really took off to encrypt email, but like it became immensely important with regards to Bitcoin. And so in a way, this decision, and again, I'll say it again, just to hammer it home, I just think it's incredible that that these guys could have seen how important computers were going to become as a means of, because the internet barely existed then, as a means of control, but also as a means of human liberation. That it's like this flip. That's why I mean it's a fork in the road. And that these same people were like, at any point in history, you have maybe like 10 people who are smart enough to do this work. It's like with the Bitcoin core. People can say, oh, it's unfair. But it's like, look, there's like 10 people on earth who are smart enough to do it. Just let them do it. At this point, it's like there's like 10 guys, the same thing. And so it just happens that 3 of them have this visionary ability to see into the future and to see how important it is. And that redounds through history and 50 years to today. And that is, so I will touch on that briefly in the film.
Fascinating story, actually, and fascinating framing as well when it comes to the vision that these people could have, and even the way you explain or compare Bitcoin Core developers to that. I think it's nice framing. I like it. It's good ways of explaining this. Basically.
I mean, I'm pushing now in the film a slightly different thesis that is that I think is mine. I'm slightly reluctant to say it out loud, but I suppose there'll be the greatest chance, because I'll probably mess up how I describe it. Then no one will understand what I'm saying anyway. But I'm pushing an idea that I think that this is going to sound incredibly ambitious and insane, but there's this whole element of going back to Darwin in the film now. Okay. And the idea that nature is characterized by ruthless competition. And I think that in anarchist philosophy, particularly in the work of Kropotkin and people who followed him, there's always been this idea that that's not a complete picture of how development in nature actually happens, and that there's this massive degree of cooperativity and cooperation between interspecies. And as I'm sure you've heard and people have heard, ever since I first heard about mycelium networks and how they operate, I've been interested in, not it was before the Bitcoin thing, but that seemed to me to pose this idea that maybe cooperativity is far more important to how nature has developed, and that this idea that there's a left where you say, look, we need institutions and we need to give up our power to these institutions, governments, and so on, in order to get social order. And then on the right, they say, no, fuck you. We're not giving up anything. We need everyone to be free and do what they want in order to get efficient markets. And out of that will arise some form of social order. And if you don't like the way it looks, it's probably because you're weak or lazy. I'm not trying to betray my tendencies here, but I think that's a fair-ish.
Yeah.
And I think what for example, mycelium networks show, and there are other examples, many other examples, coral, gut microbiota, for example, just to name another two, show that, and this is what I'm staking the film on now, is that these are a kind of institutions that arise in nature, and which were just not possible for people like Darwin to observe. Yeah. And that if you look at what mycelium are doing, they're enabling and affording cooperativity between different trees, different species of trees, and indeed other creatures, ants and so forth, and other colonies of microbacteria. And same with coral. Everywhere you see coral, you see the emergence, you see like explosions of life. It's famous in marine films. And so what is this? Like, look at a coral. It's like a kind of institution that it gains life from interacting with the things that circulate around it. But the things that circulate around it gain life and a form of cooperativity and without coercion via their interactions with the coral. And I'm sure you can see where I'm going with this, that the emergence of free software in that context can be seen as the emergence of a mycelium network or as the emergence of a coral, not merely in that, people are sharing and it's peer-to-peer, but it's like a kind of institution that doesn't rely on a top-down hierarchical, you will do what I say or I will fuck you up type of, which is like every institution ever, right? It says, if you interact with me, I'll give you something and I will gain from it as well. I will be able to live. Bitcoin is also like that. So Bitcoin is like the emergence of coral reefs. It's like a type of organism which sustains itself through this interaction and has the affordance, creates the affordance of collective action without domination. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you can see where I'm going with this. This is like a fourth way in politics, because it's like it's neither left nor right. It doesn't require you to give up your sovereignty to the Leviathan. Mm-hmm. It says, no, you interact with the Leviathan because it's good for you. The Leviathan is made from you. And the Leviathan doesn't need to dominate you in order for you to get that social cooperation, that ability to interact together, and it doesn't do what the libertarians do, which is say, no, we can't have any form of institution really that to cohere around, because that requires you to give up your sovereignty, and they'll always fuck you over because there's always intermediaries, and they're right. They are provably right, and that was always a problem, right, for leftists like me. And I think I admit it's pretty ambitious, but that's what I'm pitching, that this is like a fourth way in politics. We saw the beginning of it with free software, and Bitcoin is a realization of it at a kind of like cellular, like, and that, the only reason Darwin didn't talk about this stuff is because it was too early and it was difficult to observe these things. But as time's gone on, biologists have realized in waves, they're realizing these kinds of institutions, anchor organisms almost, are the very basis of what allows life to exist and what allows it to emerge and flourish. And I think this is a picture, I don't know what you think, but I think this may be a picture that everybody can get behind.
So I agree. I like the way you talk about it, because it is, in essence, it is what it is, right? It is, Bitcoin is just this purely participative thing, but that has the long-term benefits of supporting everyone, and everyone, by using Bitcoin, supports Bitcoin itself. It's a way of thinking. So I had thought of Bitcoin the network in terms of mycelium as well. Even my girlfriend was telling me that, in explaining that Bitcoin could spread in my next film, I could use this image of, underground mycelium, but that's too expensive animations for my budget. but basically,
and for mine as well.
But this idea is is very nice, and I think that it also makes it very unbiased. Actually, it's just comparing such organisms, comparing them to different institutions, then adding the level of free software, the way you described it. I mean, it just makes sense. It's just quite difficult to frame this in a film, though, no? Like, how do you? I mean, like.
Yeah, I mean, look, yeah, I basically decided that the film probably is going to be. Well, look, so I think you can do it. Like, I think this Machine Greens was really ambitious as well.
Yeah.
If you think about how it started, how the film begins,
right.
It's like it's very much taking the high road, and intellectually, you know, it's like. And so there is a lot of heavy lifting to do, and I will admit that I am in the land of like complete insanity. Like I am, and I try to stay mentally healthy and to sort of, but I think it is, and I think that I've just accepted that it's going to be a if it succeeds, it's just going to be one of those, you know, mind blown type films.
Yeah, definitely. No, but I mean, I think, you know, I mean, you're clearly a very philosophical kind of person. I think you even mentioned that you taught philosophy, right?
I did, yeah.
Right, and the way you explain these things, no matter how far-fetched they can be, like you know, it's easy to follow. Like I don't doubt that it. Like I think it's a solid story. Like really,
yeah, that's the thing. It has to be.
And it's unique as well, right? There's no such story in the Bitcoin film space today, and I think this is the kind of story that we need.
That's why was reluctant to say it, because I think the thesis is new. But I think people will be confused enough that I'm saying the same thing that Brandon Quittem said, that, like you say, the network thing. It's like, yeah, the network thing. It is a network thing. But I think what's new, and I think, so here's the thing, basically I had this idea to write a book of political philosophy, which was, because Kropotkin, anarchist philosopher, a prince, by the way, Russian prince, wrote a whole book essentially saying, look, nature is characterized by cooperative processes. And this wasn't just him who said this. This was like the whole Russian response to Darwin. Because as it turns out, if you have an environment which is like a jungle, which is like fecund, and everything grows and there's loads of opportunity, organisms compete a lot. But if you have an environment like the Russian steppe, which is hard and difficult, they start to cooperate, because it's the inanimate stuff that's difficult, not each other. And so what the Russians saw was different to what Darwin saw. So they started this whole chain of philosophy, and Kropotkin just happened to write English. So it's his books that people read. And then this emerges into sort of one of the core elements of anarchist philosophy, the idea that cooperativity, that it's possible for people to cooperate without hierarchies. That's the thing. And so I wanted to write a book that was a contribution to this philosophy, with this new set of observations that have gone on with people like Paul Stamets and the other mycelium people, and then this new stuff about corals and gut microbiota. That's really similar stories that suggest that, like, we are not independent organisms. Like, in our guts and in our bodies are these immensely complicated colonies of organisms that we're constantly sharing, and even regulate how we feel. And so it's like the way things look is not vis-a-vis individuals is not really how they are, you know. And so I had this idea to do a book, and then at some point I was like, you know what, if this is the big idea, so it's after I've made the trailer, obviously, if this is the big idea, let's put this in, let's make the film be about this. Because of course, one of the things it gives me is it gives me the ability to show like underwater scenes and colonies in the gut and microbiota. And initially the idea is you'll be like, why the fuck is this guy showing me all these images? And then you gradually get the sense of like, oh, this is a whole theory of like, yeah, like I say, that you mentioned this, you mentioned the idea of the sovereign and of the Leviathan, that basically it's a contribution to political philosophy, and it's to put it in a grand way, in the sense that I don't think, I've checked as much as I can, maybe some viewer will tell me that I don't think anybody's had this idea.
Yeah, it's I love it though. I think it's cool, and I look forward to watching the film with that, because honestly, it feels like it'll just transport you into a different way of thinking. That I think.
Yeah, and I've really got to say thanks to the people who funded the film, because partly because of this Machine Greens and partly because of Brad Mills and others, but particularly Brad Mills, that has given me the time, because I don't know whether it's going to be a good film. I don't know. I do my best, but I've had time to develop this idea, and it is out there, and I've concluded that it's better to be out there and make a film that's like, as you say, it has to be more than just a rah-rah, like a Bitcoin primer or a Bitcoin sales pamphlet. And I don't think Bitcoin will be the only thing. I think that the most inspiring thing is if you grasp this idea that humans have now evolved the ability to structuring institutions that afford the ability to coordinate without dominance, without being dominated, without authority, without epistemic dominance. And we've done it for software, which is incredibly important. We're doing it or have done it for money. The question then arises, what else can we do it with? Because if you can organize money without epistemic dominance, without that guy in the suit saying like, I am the fucking man, you must do it like I say, the question arises, what else could you do it for? And like the world is your oyster. And that really is that I'm hoping will be I'm not sure whether I end the film with that at the moment, or with the more present question of like whether BlackRock has figured out a way to encircle Bitcoin. Because of course, although you have these fantastically powerful institutions in nature, what I call institutions in nature, coral networks and mushroom mycelial networks, they still do get destroyed, and they still can be. We're perfectly capable of destroying them. So it may be that like we stand at a fork in the road, right? Another one like in the 1970s, where we either recognize that now we have the ability to go beyond, because this is what anarchists always wanted, right? This is what we were animated by, the idea that we could get social coordination without dominance. Without being extorted, without having our freedom removed. And if we've proven that we have the ability to do that, it's incredibly inspiring. It's literally epochal, and if someone else, if like the ultimate bad guy has figured out how to encircle it, one of these examples, like Bitcoin, one of the examples of how to do this, that's extremely serious. And obviously it's more serious. What I'm saying is it's more serious than just Bitcoin itself. It points to like an attempt to stymie what should be the unfolding of the next phase of human history. So, is that ambitious enough for you all?
That's pretty ambitious. Yeah. And so, okay, so before we wrap up, can you tell us, what stage of the production are you at? Maybe how do you see the production is going to go down? And do you have any idea of when like the film might be ready?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to get the film out. I mean, I think we're getting close to a new bull market, right? I think
we're 6 months away from the halving. Usually, like
famous last words, but I'd like to coincide it with that, and that was always the plan.
Yeah.
And so I've tried to keep my powder dry in terms of money. And frankly, if it came to it, I would fund it myself. If I had to, I would continue funding it myself. And so that gives you some idea, like during the bull market. So somewhere next year, I'm guessing would be, as for where I am, I've done like some major interviews, by which I mean, I've done these like crazy 3-day marathon. I did one with Troy Cross, 3-day marathon, where he could say thanks to Troy because he was incredibly generous. And I think we pushed it as far as it could possibly go in terms of what we asked for from him. I did a big interview with Martin Gurry, who's this ex-CIA guy, which again will sound out there, but it'll come together. And I'm going to do a couple more of these big ones. And then we did, like what I call smaller interviews, but which would be like Pacific Bitcoin or Miami, where they're like 1 hour or 3 hours. And I'm going to do a lot more of those. So the big ones I'm trying to get are, I'm trying to work with a guy who is called Merlin Sheldrake, who is a mushroom guy.
Okay.
For obvious reasons. He's a biologist, and he specializes in mycelial networks, and he hasn't got this institutional theory because no one's got it.
Yeah. Was he the guy that went on Joe Rogan and he wears a hat made of mushroom or something?
I think that's Paul Stamets, older guy.
Okay. Yeah.
Because Merlin is Rupert Sheldrake's son, and Rupert Sheldrake is a totally out there British I don't know what you call him, biologist, but his son is quite a serious and excellent writer. And basically what I'm trying to do is convince him that I have an idea that's worth him responding to, which is very weird, because most people just come to them and say, okay, you tell me the things, I want your things. And I go to people going like, this is what Troy's problem was. I go to them going like, here's my thesis. Now you fit your ideas in, and no one likes that. And that's,
it's difficult. Yeah,
it's tricky. So big one with him, maybe a big one with Adam Back. To be maybe a big one with Jeff Booth. And the difficulty there is, can you get 3 days with Adam? Can you get 3 days with Jeff? Actually, is incredibly generous. And then it'll be a bunch of smaller ones. And yeah, in terms of development, well, I'm editing the first like a rough of the first 30 minutes at the moment, and that will give us sort of something to go on, because I don't know what you're doing in your film, but I'm hoping to use a lot of machine generated stuff. I've concluded that like to put that stuff in rough and then come back to it at the end of the process, because my conclusion is whatever is available now in terms of AI is going to look shit compared to what's available in a year, let's say.
For sure.
And but to give you an idea, what I'm trying to do is like what they call 2.5D stuff, which is like generating beautiful images using Mid-Journey or Stable Diffusion. And I've built a machine to do Stable Diffusion at home in the studio, and trained it on art I like, and then I'm able to make these like stills and to use those as archive, kind of in place of what you would put archive. And then what I've been doing is I'm now working on how to separate those stills into depth layers, and there is a whole plugin for Stable Diffusion that does that.
Is it the kind of thing that Mid-Journey also has, that is a bit of a zoom?
No, what it well, yes, but what it does, sorry for anybody who's listening who's not a filmmaker, but what it does is, so if you take the image of me now, you've got the microphone, which I guess the computer has blurred out, me, and then the background, and the background has an artificial blur on it to simulate depth of field. I think that's the iPhone that's doing that. And so what you do, so let's imagine this was a flat image developed by Mid-Journey. What you do is you estimate using AI that this is the foreground, this is the midground, and that's the background. It separates these things into layers, and then it draws around what it thinks should be behind you in such a way that you can move the camera across the image and get a sense of 3 dimension. So you're able to do dollies and pans in a way that sort of gives you a sort of what they call 2.5D. It's the parallax effect.
Right.
So I'm hoping to use a bunch of those because I think they look good and they're not going to date. If you've ever seen a film like The Kid Stays in the Picture, if you've ever seen a film about Hollywood, it's really good. They do that using the old school way, was they used to literally cut photos up using scissors,
right,
and then mount each layer on a physical rack, and then
move them. Yeah, I see. So I've seen
And
stuff like that done on like in After Effects, or Photoshop and then After Effects.
yeah, and I'm still at the moment, Photoshop and After Effects is the best way to do it, I think. But there is an emerging AI ability to do that, and so maybe that. So I'm sort of leaving. I'm leaving some of those in just with flat images for now, because I think it'll come clear how to do it. But yeah, I should have that 30-minute sequence done in the next month or so, and then we're putting together the other big interviews. It might interest people, might interest you. I decided since the iPhone 15 came out, which is what I'm talking to you on, this is a 15 Pro, that I'm going to do a bunch of interviews as Skypes. So like this, but faked. So what actually happens is a gopher, like a wrangler, visits the interviewee's house with a kit that we send to the. So say you want to do an interview in New York, you send a kit out. The kit goes to a wrangler. The kit has the iPhone, a decent lavalier microphone, some power devices, a disc in case the interview runs long, and they go. And then all they need is a laptop. They go to the interviewee's house. They suss out the framing. They set up the phone just like this on top of the laptop. They record the interview for us, but the interviewee is just doing a Skype. And then in the film, we frame it as I'm Skyping with Pierre. Thanks. And it just appears like, oh, the filmmaker is calling people during the film. And so you've got these big, juicy, high definition interviews. And then you've got these Skype calls. But like even the Skype calls are actually 4K, HDR, log. So you can grade it and so on and so on. But it's like, that'll cost me $1,000 to do that. Whereas it costs me $10,000 at least to do a 3-day interview.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Well, if ever, I don't know, maybe people like this around the world from our community of the Bitcoin Film Fest, maybe they could also help out with this kind of stuff. I don't know. We have a bunch of filmmakers.
Oh, God, if anybody wants to help out and they're in a major city and they want to be a wrangler to do this, if you're in New York or LA or San Francisco, it's paid. And that'd be fantastic. You receive the kit, you go and meet the person who's probably some big Bitcoiner. It might be, there's a couple of biologists and stuff like that, but you go and it's a day's work, and it just needs somebody who understands. I mean, you don't even need to be a film person necessarily. As long as you're comfortable dealing with technology, you receive the case a few days in advance so you can test everything and stuff. So you're more than welcome to reach out if you want to help me out.
That's
like
cool.
I say, it's paid. It's not
No, that's cool. Yeah, we'll make sure also to communicate it on our Telegram group.
Thanks.
Yeah, but okay, I think we've talked already quite a bit. I think maybe it's time we bring it to an end.
Thanks so much for listening to me ramble on. I'm sure you know what it's like to be a filmmaker in the middle of a process where you're like, how do I give my pitch? So I hope it's interested someone, and that
I mean, it definitely interested me. I think it was a really, really good conversation. Do you have maybe some last words? I don't know, some things you're thinking maybe you'd share?
Well, I always need people to talk to, and if anybody is interested in the work I'm doing in the film and wants to be involved in some way, just drop me a line, because I work almost completely online, and there's lots of opportunities to be involved in a credited way, to discuss and to help, and to and maybe even for some roles in a paid way. Filmmaking can be a lonely business sometimes, and so I'm always up for cooperation. And if anybody's interested and they like the thesis, particularly if they like the idea, because I think it's going to be unique amongst Bitcoin films, I think. Then if you like the ideas, then drop me a line if you want to help out with research or finding archive, clips on YouTube. There's so much to do, and I'd be really happy to have help and company.
All right, nice. Yeah, cool. Yeah, okay. Well, look, I think we're very, at least I am very eager to see, the progress you make and see the film when it'll be done. It sounds very interesting and also very unique, especially as a film in the Bitcoin. I think in general, just with the thesis itself, but also in the Bitcoin space particularly. So it's very exciting to hear that, and wish you good luck in doing all of this. Yeah, so thanks a lot, Jamie, for being with us today. And to everyone listening, thank you for listening. It was a great conversation. We hope you enjoyed it too. Remember this weekend, Plan B Lugano, and of course, don't forget the date, April 19th to 21st in Warsaw, Poland, for the second edition of the Bitcoin Film Fest, where we invite everyone to come over and celebrate also the halving with the European halving party.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's going to be great. We're very excited about it.
Enjoy Lugano.
Thanks.
All right.